Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Recent changes in U.S. diplomatic leadership in Kyiv, a legal dispute with Israel over a suspected grain shipment, and ongoing corruption case involving strategic sectors are drawing attention in Ukraine. These developments raise questions about policy direction, international coordination, and oversight during wartime. Joining us today on TVP World is Rostyslav Khotin, Senior Editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberties, Ukrainian Service. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, Ben.
So the first thing I want to touch upon is how the top U.S. diplomat currently in Kyiv, Julia Davis, is set to leave her post and retire. And this, of course, follows another case where her predecessor, Bridget Brink, also resigned and said she disagreed with U.S. policy. What should we read into such rapid replacement of diplomats?
We should read in such a way that some U.S. diplomats, professional diplomats, top U.S. diplomats, are not unhappy, but not they do not agree fully with the kind of current policy of Washington in relation with Ukraine. They think that in a time of war, Ukraine should be supported unconditionally by the United States, the strongest Western democracy, the leader of the Western world, the leader of the free world. And they do not think that Washington should be kind of try to find a kind of balance between Kyiv and Moscow, kind of, make a constant shift between Russia and Ukraine, when we don't understand exactly what that means, whether Russia is guilty attacking Ukraine, invading Ukraine, Russia is aggressor, or Ukraine is guilty not agreeing to some kind of peace deal which are not favorable to Ukraine. So the U.S. diplomat Julia Davis disagrees with this. She wants the American foreign policy to be consistent, to be very clear, to be precise in supporting Ukraine. Her predecessors also had reservations about American foreign policy. It means that in State Department, in the American diplomatic service, there are professionals who think that U.S. should give Ukraine unwavering support and clearly support Ukraine in this difficult time of war amid Russian aggression, which lasts already more than 4 years. So we should read this in this way, and taking into account the current visit by British King Charles III to America and his speech to U.S. Congress, we understand that also American allies also want America to support Ukraine clearly and directly.
All right. We're seeing more and more professional diplomats being kind of put on the side burner in replacement for people who Trump has a personal relation with. Do you think that this might open up any sort of vulnerability when it comes to the diplomatic front between Ukraine and U.S.?
I don't think so. It's been a tradition for many decades when ambassadors, for instance, are nominated not from the rank and file diplomats of the United States, or they are not professional diplomats. It's okay. It's normal practice for many countries, including Ukraine. Some diplomats are kind of top ambassadors, top envoys, personal friends or acquaintances, or simply professionals from that sphere, but not necessarily professional diplomats. It's okay. It's a normal practice for many countries, including the United States and Ukraine and many others. So I don't think that there is a problem when ambassador to country A, B, or C is appointed from ranks of loyalists or politicians or political appointees. It's okay. I don't see here a problem.
Right. Now, speaking about diplomatic issues, recently we also saw Ukraine asking Israel to act against a specific ship that's suspected of carrying grain taken from occupied territory. We have a statement from the Ukrainian Prosecutor General. Let's take a look.
The Ukrainian side is asking its Israeli partners to seize the vessel and its cargo, conduct a search. Investigators have documented the vessel's illegal entry into closed ports of Ukraine. This constitutes a gross violation of Ukrainian legislation and the norms of international maritime law.
So in your read into this, how serious is this case actually?
Yeah, the case is serious, especially for Ukraine. Ukraine is very unhappy that Israel has accepted not just one, it's the latest case, but several, at least two vessels carrying grain from which was harvested on the occupied territories of Ukraine by Russia. This vessel came from, it was kind of loaded ship to ship in the sea, not in the port of Russian Federation, but in the sea to hide this kind of trace of the grain was from occupied part of Ukraine. And it came to the Israeli port of Haifa. It's like a hub, transport hub, the biggest port in Israel. And Ukraine sent a note to Israel protesting against this. The Israeli ambassador was summoned to Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, and where the statement was read out to him, citing the unhappiness of Ukraine. You know, Russian vessels which carry grain from occupied territories of Ukraine and companies who are which are involved in this type of business are under sanctions of the European Union, of the United Kingdom, and of the United States. And here comes Israel, which states that it is an ally of Ukraine, that Israel supports Ukraine. And here comes action which actually contradicts this line that Israel is supporting Ukraine. And also some Ukrainian observers also say now these days that Israel has been actually trying to maneuver between Russia and Ukraine, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had too many calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin, that Netanyahu is very friendly to the Kremlin, despite Kremlin support for Iran and Russian-Iranian relations. Ukraine recently made some gestures towards Israel, friendly gestures, for instance, recognizing the Corps of Islamic Guard, Revolutionary Guard in Iran as a terrorist organization. So now Iranian Islamists are recognized as a terrorist by Ukraine. Also, some other things were done to Ukraine to kind of war up relations with Israel. But this case with grain from occupied territories of Ukraine transported from Russia to Israel, that is a spoiler in Ukrainian-Israeli relations.
All right, and also there's recent reports about Turkey, Egypt, Algeria reportedly buying Ukrainian grain from occupied territories as well. You mentioned this violates a lot of the international sanction rules, but realistically, what exactly can Ukraine do to ask other countries to comply with these sanctions, and are there any sort of enforcement mechanism that Ukraine can call upon?
Ukraine can ask by diplomatic channels these countries to stop import of Ukrainian grain from occupied territories. Also, Ukrainian-Algerian relations are not that important for Kyiv. Ukrainian-Egyptian relations are important, but not that important. But relations with Israel and Turkey are important. And Turkey also, according to media reports, imported some grain from Russia, which was harvested on occupied territories of Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine and especially in the south Ukraine, which is a kind of the very harvesting area, the grain making area in Ukraine. It's Zaporizhia, Kherson region in south. So that's what concerns Ukraine, that even countries which are considered by Kyiv as a top allies like Turkey and Israel are involved in this kind of import of grain from territories occupied by Russia, also from Crimea. That's what irritates Ukrainian side.
All right. Last but not least, speaking of Israel, it does seem like they're not just harboring grain, but also harboring potential fugitive as well. Mr. Mindich, who is a businessman linked in the energy sector, seems to be involved in a corruption scandal that leads all the way up. Can you tell us a little bit about this corruption case and what is going on over there?
Yeah, two prominent figures from this corruption scandal, corruption case, Timur Mindich and Alexander Zuckerman. They are both businessmen close to the president, to the inner circle of Ukrainian leadership. They escaped from Ukraine at the end of last year, and they are in Israel. Ukraine recently, the Prosecutor General Office sent to Israeli side 10 volumes of a case of documents describing this case as a proof of their guilt, as they think, in Kyiv. We will see what will be the Israeli reaction. So far, now some new details of this corruption scandal, which erupted last November, emerged. This time, it concerns the luxury properties, houses which are constructed or were constructed, had been constructed near Kyiv, in Kyiv region. Apparently, according to investigative journalists, to the top brass of Ukrainian leadership, even maybe for president, the four houses, this development is called the dynasty. Another case concerns Timur Mindich's influence over former defense minister Rustem Umerov and the company which produces drones and missiles for Ukrainian armed forces. The whole thing is important because apparently there was a corruption case, according to National Anti-Corruption Bureau and Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor Office. The corruption concerns the energy sector. Apparently, the biggest, the monopolist in the energy sector, Ukrenergo company, and apparently around $100 million has been some kind of appropriated or stolen or somehow went to shadow sphere, and apparently from 10 to 15% on all transactions and all contracts and deals were pocketed by this kind of corrupt scheme, which in Ukraine is called Midas. So the resonance was quite significant. I just hope that soldiers on front lines will not be demoralized by the corruption cases in Kyiv, among these circles which link to the highest leadership of Ukraine. I just hope that it won't have a demoralizing effect on Ukrainian soldiers on the front line.
Right, especially at this very crucial time, we're seeing Ukraine taking pressure from various different fronts as well. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.